said that I could start a few minutes early in case I run over, so I hope that's okay with you. It's lovely to see you all here, and I can tell that some people are smiling under the mask. I'm lucky enough I'm able to take it off for a minute. But it's so nice to be here in person with everyone. Gess has always been here for years and years in Dubai, and it's always been something that brings everyone together, so it's lovely to see you. Thanks again for attending this short 20-minute talk, and I'm going to try and condense as much into it as I can, so forgive me if I speak quite quickly. I'm going to talk about well-being building blocks in primary education. And I've picked this nice image because we all know when kids use building blocks and they make lovely elaborate designs, but there's so many parts to it, and that is essentially what well-being is in primary education. So to start, just a brief introduction to who I am. My name is Ashley Green. I've lived in Dubai for about 12 years now, and more recently I work in a school called Gess Dubai, and I really love working there. I think I'm in my 8th year there, 8th. But my wellbeing journey personally started a long time ago, and it was maybe around 12 years ago when I moved to Dubai. I found mindfulness, and I had to find something to care for my own mental health and well-being, especially as an educator. You know so many stories that people talk about, and we all say familiar things. So that process has been always part of my life, because I know that I need to keep a balance. I need to look after myself. The children get a better me if I care for myself. And then that took me on to deepen my studies, so I started a master's degree in positive psychology and coaching psychology, and my dissertation was on teacher wellbeing. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the PhD wellbeing census. They do an adults at school survey, and I wanted to find out what made teachers thrive, because the rest of us can learn lessons from them, so hopefully I'll be able to share that with you soon. So I want to give things to take away from this talk, and here are the 5 main blocks that when I've looked at all the research and all the things that I've been doing in school and learning from other people, here are the 5 things that I wanted to share. And I couldn't find an image with 5 building blocks, so I gave a jigsaw, but here they are. And the reason why they're all in a jigsaw form is they're all connected, they all overlap, and they're all interlaced with each other. So the first one, where you are now and going forward. So many things happen in school already when it comes to well-being. There's already programs in place, PSHE, the moral social curriculum, parts of that are in education now here in Dubai. There's different elements of positive education in there. But where's a really important place to start is doing an in-house audit of everything that's happened, whether that's an early finish on a Thursday, whether it's dress down days or charity events or anything that you would consider connected to well-being. It's really important to have an audit of everything that's happened so far, because some of it you'll be able to take forward when we get to the next blocks, and there are other things that you don't need to really include. They're just initiatives that can happen that don't essentially connect to the overall well-being vision and strategy. How has well-being been managed so far and by who? Quite often in schools there will be people who've got an interest in social development, or there'll be a counsellor, or there'll be someone in management who's interested. But again, are those the best people, and has there been adequate training in place for others to build on? So who has been managing it so far, and why, and how have they done that? So it's really looking closely at where you are and who's been involved, and then taking that as part of the block to move forward with. So going forward as well, it's really important to emphasise the complexity of well-being, and that's what we were talking about just there at the beginning. There's so many elements of well-being. We know that different departments cover well-being, health education, sport education, all the different things, but again there are so many facets to a solid, impactful well-being programme, whether it's bespoke or off the shelf as such, but we'll talk about that as well. But there's just so many facets to it, and it is really complex, and it isn't something that can just be rolled off straight away. It really needs time and consideration. And again, who are the people that should be involved? So are there people that are just really enthusiastic in your school that could be part of this team? Are there other people who have done further research or have qualifications? Very often you find there's many teachers that have got some sort of coaching accreditation that they've done outside of school, and it's not being utilised effectively, and in lots of schools it is. But then also thinking about the different teams. Quite often there will be like a wellbeing committee who deal with things like the social events and stuff like that. But then there'll be a solid core wellbeing team who are involved with the curriculum, rolling it out, uniting the stakeholders, things like that. So there's quite a few things to consider at the very beginning. And I know that many schools have already got great wellbeing journeys already, and they've got so many components to them, but this is one of the building blocks that we've almost revisited and went back to the start again and thought about these things. So clarity about the vision and the why. So more recently we have looked at our school overall core values, and the staff were involved, parents, students, and we all chose the specific words that really align with who we are as a school at the core, and we have an overall school vision. But then thinking about the wellbeing vision, it's almost another offshoot of what the core value is, and again they interlink. Why does wellbeing need to be considered? Well, we all know, especially now after the pandemic, teachers are struggling, students are struggling to come back, we're in a phase of recovery, and things are starting to look a bit more normal, especially when you look around somewhere like here. But it's really important to think about the depths of wellbeing, rather than just it being a wellbeing umbrella in the word. What does that actually mean, and why does it need to be considered in your school? So we actually came up with a separate wellbeing vision. So the overall vision for our school and our strapline, so to speak, is educated to make a difference in the world. But our wellbeing one will be released soon on the website and everything. But again, it's just another part of that. It connects to making a difference, but it talks more about the nurture and the authentic wellbeing provision in our school. So what should it look like? We all love the days where we get a donut on a Thursday and a free coffee or something, and fruit bowl, things like that. There might be a yoga class, and those are all really, really nice, and wellbeing can look like that. But what does it look like in a school context overall when you think about the day in, day out cogs? What does it look like? How does it look like day to day? So when you've got your team and your community members and you overall consider the vision together, then it's taking a real step to commit to it, as a school and a whole body. How are you going to commit to that, and what will that look like? So it's really important to be clear about your vision and why, because once you've laid those foundation blocks, then the other things come a bit easier. Also, when you think about the different programs that are available out there are so many fantastic researchers and educators that have contributed to many different programs. You might already be familiar with some of them. We know that there's positive education programs. The Institute of Positive Education in Australia in Geelong is one of the kind of founding places where positive education began, and that's all rooted in positive psychology science. You might have seen resiliency programs like Bounce Back is a good one, and there's another program that's more recent from a lady that did the same masters as I did, called Weaving Wellbeing, and that's in Ireland. So there are some brilliant things there. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. If you feel like it would be more beneficial for your school to have something, a program to follow, once you've looked at your values and the core elements that you want to include, you've got your vision and you know why you're doing it, then there are programs that can help. But also when you think about your school, it's very different from my school. My school is different from the next school. People that work there live and breathe the culture day to day. You know what it's like to work and live and teach in that school, and you know the energy from the children, you know the things that they enjoy, so the right team can really create a bespoke framework which encompasses the needs that you've identified in your school. So we've kind of decided to go down the bespoke route in our school, partly because there's just the passion and the masters that I have, but also there's other people throughout the school. We have 3 branches, we've all came together and we each have something different to contribute, so we're really enjoying that process. But also, if you decide what you want your wellbeing programme to look like, you can also then invite a consultant in and show them what you've done so far and what you want to, the ideas that you have, and an educational or wellbeing positive education consultant can come in and help you build some of the ideas that you have. It's also really important to take note of prescriptive well-being, not one size fits all. So the way that I feel an education, a wellbeing education programme should be is children have access and are taught, and the staff are taught about certain elements, and then they can go through lessons and different parts of it, but then they can choose what works for them. Very often schools, myself included, have had like Mindful Monday morning, Wellbeing Wednesday, different things, and the children have access to it and they can come if they like, it's not mandatory. But then there are children that continue and take that on. I walked by 2 little boys the other day who were meditating at playtime, so it's like, that's great. So it's just something that they take on board and they enjoy it and they feel the benefit. However, I read a study about someone who wanted to teach children that if you feel sad and you've got a sad, upset emotion, tell yourself 5 positive things. But that doesn't fit for everyone, because those 5 positive things can then make that child feel worse, but I still don't feel better, so what am I going to do now? And it's been really aware that one size doesn't fit all. For example, positive affirmations can be really valuable for some people. They can lift your mood, scientifically can change the makeup, how you feel about yourself. But again, there are studies to show that actually that can heighten senses of depression in someone that's clinically depressed. So it's been really careful that you aren't doing harm with certain interventions and things. So it's given children access to try out things, see what works, but also being aware that it's not one size fits all. Measurement and data is invaluable, so whenever you think about what you're going to introduce, how can you measure that and how can you find out if it's making an impact? So one of the kind of strands, if you like, that we're introducing to the children is a block on emotional well-being, emotional literacy, introducing the words, talking about what they mean, and how we're going to track that is using an app called YouHu, which is a really lovely app, and it's got more features this year, so you can actually analyse the data and find out patterns and trends in your classroom when it comes to emotions. So that's the nice way to do that, and again, you can connect however your measurement tool is. You can make them as well in Power BI, but again, you have to make sure that they're impactful and useful. So then the strategy here. This is something that I wasn't familiar with, and we had a new assistant head join us about 2 years ago, and she has just kind of opened my eyes completely to what strategy is. So then I've read some more books. There's a really brilliant book I would recommend from Dr. Yolanta Burke, and it is all about introducing well-being, implementing well-being programs in schools. It's a fantastic, fantastic resource, and it talks a lot about strategy. So strategy is a word you hear all the time in like business and education, of course, in different areas, but when it came to well-being, I didn't really know much about it, so I've learned a lot in the last couple of years. And I've learned that strategy is such a great foundation for success. So I'm only speaking about the wellbeing strategy that we have at the minute. And what we did find, without the strategy, people can meander in different directions without engaging in the process. So you might have a teacher that's really excited about research they've found about optimism, and they want to introduce it to a year group in optimism. You're like, well, that's great, but that might impact that year group, but then what's the connection? What happens after? What happens before? Then, if you think about all the things that happen in your school, are they connected, or are people just taking initiative and going off and doing their own things? Which can also, you've got to start somewhere. I think that's part of the process when people are trying different things. But again, without the strategy, you find that happens more often. So what it looks like now in our school, there are set people, and if anyone wants to introduce something new, they go and meet that team and they explain to them, and we find where it's connected in our milestones and our plans, and if it's not, then we find another way to do it, but it doesn't fit in with our strategy. So again, a multidisciplinary approach, a bit like I was talking about before, it's not one size fits all, so finding a variety of ways to implement wellbeing so that all those different types of learners, including staff, can access information and interventions in different ways. Also part of the strategy, which I suppose we've found, is amalgamation of research that's out there and also the policy makers. It's got to work for all parties. So I will be a person that says, I found this really interesting paper about this, I found this framework, and then it comes down to the policy makers and school leaders to find a way to help that work in your school if they agree with it. Obviously we know things can become top down, sometimes well-being's bottom up and it makes people take notice, but finding that real lovely balance of researcher, research what's already out there and policymakers' beliefs and governing bodies, and finding that balance is a good part of strategy. And something that I find happens quite often in all schools can be a reactive element. For example, if there was an issue with bullying in year 5, and then all of a sudden the year 5 teachers do 3 days bullying interventions, and you understand, you feel it in your heart why when you do that, you know why you do those things, and of course you want to solve the problem. But then how long after that does it stay impactful? So when you have a well-being curriculum or framework, however you want to put it, that's bespoke or off the shelf, you can think about how preventative measures really support this whole thing that we're trying to do with well-being. So although those little mini interventions, of course they can support children and they reinforce prior learning, but a lot of the time if you think about the preventative measures, they often have much more impact long-term than the shorter ones. Just checking the time here. So when we were having a look at what we think our curriculum is going to look like, obviously I had my own ideas, I listened to research and policymakers, chat with the teams, the people that have all been put in place, and it's really exciting. And what we did do was have a look at all the different programmes that are available here. So I've listed some of them for you. Hopefully you'll have access to these slides as well, so you'll be able to read them a bit closer. But we looked really deeply into all the brilliant things that are already out there. And we kind of analysed the themes that were coming up. Did those themes align with the things that we originally wanted to go with? The ones that we chose for a variety of different reasons, like the building blocks I've talked about so far. And this is kind of what we've come up with so far. We're looking, all the green ones, don't know how clear it is, but the green ones are what we were provisionally planning for half-term blocks. So block on relationships, emotions, character strength, resilience and coping, gratitude and mindfulness. And then also that's threads through with different themes like engagement, accomplishment, self-care and meaning. And you'll find a lot of these in the PERMA framework, so we aren't reinventing the wheel, but we're also not taking something quite structured and specific. We're having a look at how it's going to fit into our context. So this is the kind of the main themes that we're going to go with. And again, finding ways to measure them. So like I said, for the emotions block, we're going to use UHU. When it comes to character strengths, we're going to have a look at something else and maybe make that ourselves and decide how best to measure those things. And thank you for listening to me. I want to just give time for questions in a minute or so. These are all my social media handles, and I really would love to speak with, because I know that there'll be so many of you sitting there with great ideas and things that have really worked well. And to me, this is what wellbeing in education is all about: sharing best practice, what works, and learning from each other. And also, this little QR code is a link to an online course that I created for this purpose. Not all the ones that we're using in the school, but there were blocks that I felt really important to me that I wanted to bring together in a kind of compact place. So this is a link to an online course if you're interested in looking at that as well. So thank you so much. And if there's any questions, the lovely lady at the back has a mic.